Welcome to Nifty 50 Photographers. Today's video I'm going to talk about the dilemma of changing your camera. So I was one of the first Sony A7 III users. In fact, I switched from using Nikon to Sony because of this camera. Why did I do that? Well, at the time Nikon didn't have a mirrorless solution, and they didn't have a solution that would film 4K video that was within my budget. So the Sony A7 III was a real breakthrough. It was £2,000, I think $2,000 in the US. And it was a true hybrid camera. It gave the ability to shoot 4K video, and it also had great low light performance. So it was great for taking still photos too. And that's what I wanted. I can't afford to spend £6,000 on a camera body and go for things like the Sony A1, unfortunately. But Sony A7 III gave me a great solution. It gave many of the features that you got from higher cameras, particularly its focus system. Now, I'd always dabbled with the Sony system. I had an early Sony A7 and I loved that. So when the A7 III came along, it was great to transition to it. I bought my A7 III in 2018. And 2 years later I bought a second model just to speed up my workflow because I love the camera so much, and that allows me to have each body with a different lens on, so I can quickly switch from one to the other. That really speeds up my work. Now this year Sony announced the Sony A7 IV, which of course, new camera, is going to have some new technology and new benefits, but is it really worth me upgrading? So I've been, like many of you I guess, looking at all the reviews online and trying to decide, is it the right thing for me. Fortunately there's none in the shop, so I can't physically handle one and try it out for myself. So it's a decision I'm trying to make just using tools from a virtual world, if you like. And these are the conclusions I've come to. Now I'd love to know if you're going through the same dilemma. Please let me know in the comments and let me know what you decided. Do you think it's worth the upgrade? So these are the things I've considered. Firstly, from a photography point of view, it's got a better sensor. Now, that's always a bit of a benefit. You get some slight improvements, perhaps in low light performance and perhaps in handling colors. But really, probably not worth me upgrading just for that sensor. I'm pretty happy with the results I'm getting with the Sony A7 III. And always when you switch cameras, it takes you a while to learn how to get the best out of your camera. So I know there'll be a downside for a few months as I optimize the use of the A7 IV. It's got better AF tracking. Now that is a definite bonus. I know from tests I've seen online that the A7 III tends to miss some of its shots. It gets it right, its AF tracking right, about 65% of the time, which okay is pretty good, but the shot you always wanted was one of the ones where it got it wrong. But so definitely AF tracking would be a reason for me to upgrade. Whether it's worth the extra money, let's discuss that at the end. It's got a 33 megapixel sensor. Now that's up from 24 in the A7 III, but am I really concerned about that? If I was a wildlife photographer, then maybe I would, because you often want to crop in tightly on images that are a long way away and you don't want any extra noise. But for me, I do a lot of property, a bit of portrait stuff and general commercial product photography, so it doesn't make really that much of a difference. Most of my images are seen on websites and things like that, so I'm not cropping in and needing that massive resolution. So frankly, I wouldn't upgrade for that reason. Got a better viewfinder. Okay, it's going to be brighter and better to see, but there aren't many occasions where I find that a challenge, so that isn't going to persuade me to upgrade either. The screen has much improved movement. The A7 III only gives you a tilt screen, whereas on the A7 IV it tilts and rotates, so you can look at the screen when you're looking at the camera, and for me that's a real benefit. When I do a lot of my property photography, sometimes I'm cramped into small spaces and I rely on looking at the screen as my viewfinder, and sometimes that tilt just isn't enough to be able to get my head in the right position to see what I want, and I have to hope for the best. So that would be a real benefit and something that would persuade me to change. The other thing it does is it closes the shutter completely. The mechanical shutter comes across, so when you're changing lenses there's no danger of dust falling onto the sensor. have to say I love that idea. I've noticed it being, when I switch from conventional DSLRs to mirrorless, one of the downsides was you get much more dust on your sensor, just especially if you've got to change lenses in the field. So that's a real plus point. Now let's talk about the video side of it, because this is where it becomes much more interesting. So as a hybrid shooter, I'm shooting photos and video, and the A7 IV can shoot 4K 60p. Now that is a real nice benefit for me, something that I would definitely use and persuade me to change. AF tracking is also excellent in video mode as well, and that's a real bonus. At the moment I struggle with the AF tracking on the A7 III and often switch to manual focus because it's a terrible thing to get back after a video shoot, find that everybody's out of focus. The other thing it does is it shoots in S-Log3 and 10-bit 422. Now those are also great benefits to me. It means you can film video in low light, which is often the case for me. I'm often filming indoors, and it will allow me to color grade and produce a nicer final, more cinematic image. And so that is something that is a real bonus. Now these are things that would normally be in the A7 III's, and I think the A7 III's does some of its video better, but to get up to that kind of level with the A7 IV and still have a great stills camera and still be saving money, that's something that's a definite positive. It still apparently has problems with rolling shutter, so that's not going to help at all, but it does have that tilt screen, so when I'm making videos like this one where I want to see what's going on the camera, I can tilt the screen instead of having to fit an additional display. Now I do get around that by using a little additional display, so it's not really that big a deal for me to put that on, but it's just something that would be a lot more convenient, so that's another plus point. Now finally, there's obviously some points that apply to both video and to photos. It's got better ergonomics. I don't really mind the ergonomics of the A7 III, but if it's more comfortable in my hand, that's an added bonus. There's a new menu system. I always have mixed feelings about this because it takes you such a long time to learn and get familiar with the menu system. And when you're doing photography, certainly every day, you just want to do it almost by instinct. You're concentrating on the composition, your settings and stuff, a second nature to you, and you just want to know where everything is easily. So to me, that's a little bit of a downside. I've got to learn it again. Having said that, the Sony menu system on the A7 III is a little bit cumbersome, so if it's made that simpler, well, that's going to be a bonus. The drawback for me would be I'd probably still have an A7 III as my second camera, so I'm going to be switching between two menu systems. That's going to be a bit of a pain in the ass. And the final thing is the record button and some extra command dials. So the record buttons have moved to the top. That's a big plus. Saves me having to fiddle around looking at the back, trying to find the button on the back of the camera. And having another dial that I can pre-program to what I want to use it for, instead of just exposure compensation as it is on the A7 III, that's another great benefit. So what should I do? Well, the one thing we haven't talked about is the cost of upgrading. So the new Sony A7 IV is being marketed in the UK at £2,400. It's not a cheap camera, but it is cheaper compared to something like an A1 at 6,000, and it's giving you some of the benefits like the autofocus tracking system. It's very similar to that you get in the A1, so you could argue very good value, especially as it's a hybrid camera. Now I would trade in one of my old camera bodies. I might get £700 or £800 for that, so to me the difference is around about £1,600. Quite a lot of money, but it's a hybrid camera. I've had 4 years use out of my A7 III, so it's getting to a point where I should be thinking about changing it. Now the main frustration is there's none of this camera in stock anywhere. Everywhere I look, it's only available on pre-order. Now to me the advantage would be to change now before the end of my financial year so I can offset some of the capital costs against my tax bill. And if I can't do that, then that's another negative for me. I don't understand why Sony wouldn't get more stock, especially as it's financial year end for many businesses at this time of year. Which has made my decision easy. I'm not going to pre-order the camera. I don't see enough benefit to justify that cost right now. if I hold out for a few more months, sometimes Sony do some special offers over the summer period or towards the autumn, where they might do a cashback deal on a trade-in, or they might do some deal where you get money off a lens. So I'll hold out for that, by which time they might have ironed out one or two little kinks that'll come with any new model. So that's my decision. But what did you decide? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy this kind of content, please think about subscribing to the channel, and give this video a like if you've enjoyed it. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.